Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Som TV podcast. My name is Jason Wise. Glad to have you here. I am recording right now up in Napa, where we are premiering our brand new film, Ghosts of Napa Valley. It's been a lot of fun. It has been really, really fascinating movie to watch audiences see this. And if you're one of the first to have seen it, thank you so much. Next tickets are going to be Los Angeles. Working on New York City, Chicago, other places. If you want to book a screening, go to somfilms.com. Or look for tickets that are available. You can also go to somfilms.com. And don't forget, October 11th, we are going to drop the film on Som TV worldwide with a bunch of extras. So subscribe to Som TV for sure to get this. Also coming to Som TV, we have a brand new blind tasting session with the cast of Ghosts of Napa Valley, Claire Copey and Shakira Jones, and it's really funny. It's coming early next week. On today's podcast, I'm going to have a conversation with Ani Duzdabanyan, who is a writer for, among other things, the LA Times, and has been covering the story of a wine region that goes back 6,000 years that is now gone. It is basically a wine region that's been around for so long and is about to disappear due to a war. And if you've seen Cup of Salvation, you know this story to some extent, but it was sort of peripheral to the movie. She's going to talk to me about kind of what that means and how strange it is to lose something with that much cultural heritage. Without further ado, writer Ani Duzdabanyan. Ani, it's a pleasure to have you on the Som TV podcast. It means a lot.
Thank you so much, Jason.
You know, you wrote a fabulous article about our last film in the LA Times, about Cup of Salvation and the region and the food and all the stuff. And it, honestly, I was emotional reading it. And so to be able to talk to you about a new article that you've written that was published, I believe, in Men's Journal, is that right?
Yes, that's right.
With Som TV's own alumni, Matthew Kaner, who's been tons of stuff. So today we're going to talk about a region that is no more, an entire wine region. And I want to put some context on this, that part of this story, and at least a small amount, appears in our last film, Cup of Salvation, at least a part of it. It's not the whole story. The whole story is much grander and bigger and important. But Ani, where do we start? What is your article? What was it about? And how do we start this conversation?
Thank you so much for the kind words. And yes, this article, Artsakh, as you know, or you might not know, unfortunately, this region just ceased to exist. And it was a beautiful region. It was producing great wines. And just to briefly talk about Artsakh or Nagorno-Karabakh, it's a landlocked region that was part of the historical Armenia for at least the last 3 millennia. Artsakh was annexed to the Azerbaijani in 1920 by the Soviet leadership, but at that time it became a point of political and military contention between the local ethnic Armenians and the Azeris. When the Soviet Union collapsed, there was a war that broke into the region in between Artsakh and Azerbaijan, and Russia brokered a ceasefire in 1994. When Armenia gained the independence in 1991, and the war ended in Artsakh in 1994, a lot of Armenians started to move there to establish businesses, make investments. And some Armenians started to make investments in re-establishing a wine region there. A lot of Armenians were from the United States. And my article is about some of them who not only invested in the wine industry, but also built restaurants, built hotels, factories, and orchards, so many things. Because the Armenian community in diaspora and the Armenians in the homeland, in Armenia and in Artsakh, were seeing Artsakh as something that belonged to them, something that wanted to develop and remain Armenian forever. But unfortunately, the politics and the war interrupted all this. In 2020, September of 2020, the war erupted again. It ended in 44 days, again brokered by Russia. And in 2023, after a 9-month-long blockade by Azerbaijan, 120,000 ethnic Armenians had to flee their ancestral homes, leaving behind everything, the places of worship, property, livelihood, and the entire wine region. So this is briefly the story, very briefly, the history of this conflict in Artsakh. I'm not in politics, so it's really hard for me to talk about the politics. I leave this to the professionals. I'm writing about wine, and the purpose of this article is to tell about the wine region that existed in Artsakh or in Nagorno-Karabakh, and now it's no more. It's complicated. It's really complicated.
Well, and it's easy. I think this is one of the regions of the world, and there are many that are on fire, particularly right now, where people say, well, why can't they just figure it out? Why can't they, this place, this person was here first, or this was there? It's so deeply complicated in ways that I think most Americans, Canadians, people who live in Brazil, who have a country that is relatively young, cannot understand what it is like to have thousands of years of weight attached to something. And this is partly why
Yes.
I find wine to be such a fascinating thing that you can put between these stories. Because what wine does is it anchors a people to a place physically. I mean, you physically look at it and you go, my grandfather planted those vines and here I am. It's different than, that's where my house used to be. It's just different. When we think about what kind of wine they were growing in Artsakh, do you know if there was wine during the Soviet period there, or were they replanting completely?
Yes, of course, definitely. There was wine in Soviet era, in Artsakh and in Armenia as well, and in all the republics that were part of the Soviet Union. But these wineries were growing grapes for brandy production or for dessert wines, not the high quality wine that we know now.
Mm-hmm.
So when the Soviet Union collapsed, many people just bought back the vineyards that once belonged to their forefathers. And they started to produce high quality wine that was getting better and better by time. So, four of the wineries that I was describing in my article belong to the people who once flee this region or just came back and partnered with people in Artsakh and started to grow wine, to grow grapes again and make beautiful, beautiful wine. And I'm not just saying this because I'm Armenian. The wine was really good. And the wine was sold here in the United States, in Europe, in other parts of the world, not only in Armenia. There were about 22 wineries in Artsakh, and my article is only about four of them because it was impossible to
You can't.
just fit all of them
You
in one
can't do.
article.
You can't do it all, exactly.
Yeah, and to be honest, I'm very grateful to Matthew because and Men's Journal because otherwise I couldn't tell the stories of these people. And this story is important because nobody was talking about this. Obviously, everyone was talking about the war, the human loss, the hunger, and all the horrible, horrible things that these people went through. But the wineries were there too. They existed. And in my article, I have a lot of numbers, like numbers of bottles that were produced and then imported. And for me, it is important because those are facts that these people were making wine. They were producing wine. They were importing these wines. It existed.
Mm-hmm.
Not only wine. So the production of the barrels was important too for the region, for Armenia in particularly, because the Artsakh oak is a very specific oak. So the Armenians were lucky enough to have Artsakh so close to them to buy oak for them and make barrels from this oak and Artsakh wineries as well. So now the Armenian winemakers are just importing oak from Russia, and the quality, I don't know about the quality.
There's a thing. I mean, as we know, oak has a flavor, right? I mean, it has
Yes,
a
exactly.
genuine, I hate to use the word terroir, but it really does. I mean, if you have a specific kind of oak and you grow it in a specific place, it tastes, I mean, Hungarian oak tastes like a certain thing. American oak is
Yes.
very, vanilla and baking spices and all this stuff. French oak, we know, is the standard. But Caucasian oak has a very different, some people have called it like a green minty type of a flavor to it, and it's a very different kind of thing to it that I have heard. I mean, Vahe Kashgarian, who is in my film, calls it something that's like vanilla mint in the Caucasian oak that is just not in other stuff, and that's fascinating to me. But so Artsakh, is it pretty forested then? I mean, does it have a good percentage of it that's covered by trees?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And it was beautiful.
Okay, so in the war in 2020, what happened to these winemakers when the war went the wrong direction? So what happened?
Some of the wineries, at least two of them that I know, so Aran Wines and Kataro, were the
Qatar.
first ones who lost their vineyards. Qatar wine was lucky enough to be able to transport some of the wines and some of the barrels into Armenia. Aran wine, they lost their vineyard, but they had their factory in Armenia, so they could still produce wine. They were buying the grape from the neighboring vineyards, and they were using mostly Sireni grape. I know that Alex, the owner of Aran, loved Sireni. He loves Sireni. That was something that brought them into Artsakh when everything was over. They couldn't have access to the grapes in Artsakh. So now they are experimenting with Sireni grape. And Sireni, just to make clear, Sireni is the same as Khandogni. It's an indigenous Artsakh grape varietal. It's really hard to say the word for non-Armenians.
Yes, yes. Many words are hard for non-Armenians. But this to me is, I love this about wine. I love this about language. I think this is a fascinating thing. So, like with wine, the minute somebody tastes it, they go, "Ooh, I like this. I'm going to learn how to say it." So it'll be fine once you try it. So
I sure hope so, because it's hard for everyone to say all the Georgian names, right, or Greek names,
yeah,
but they try.
yeah.
And why not Armenian names?
If you want my vote as a constant wine traveler, drinker, filmer, I think some of the Greek ones are harder than some of the Armenian ones. So you're doing okay. Did anybody stay when the Azeri troops came in and the war went the wrong direction? Did anybody stay?
In
Any
2020?
winemakers still there? Yeah. Are there any winemakers still in Artsakh?
No, that's it.
Everybody left.
Everybody left. Everybody left. And when I was speaking with Raj Kaprielian, the owner, the founder of the Takri Wines, it was so painful to hear that he asked his workers to destroy the winery, to destroy the barrels of wines, because he couldn't bear the idea that Azeris will come and they will take over all of this and they will try to sell them as their wine. And the same happened to his family during the genocide. They had wineries in Turkey.
He had a winery back in like 1916, 14, 13, that area. Wow, really?
Yes. Oh, a lot of people, a lot of Armenians used to make wine in Turkey. We have, I don't know if you're familiar with Aghajanyan wines. They're here in Napa, in Paso. They used to, his family used to make wine in Turkey. Then they flee the genocide. They came here to the United States, and he still continues to make wine.
Well, I should say, just as a complete tangent, your name, Ani, is based off of one of the most historic and important cities on the Silk Road ever.
Yes.
I mean, in fact, it was the target of the Mongols in the 1300s because it was one of the largest cities of the region. And now it is a few ruined buildings on the very far eastern side of Turkey, and you can't go there as an Armenian. So, I mean, if you think about just your name and that village of Ani, how different things have shifted back and forth. There's a lot here. This podcast can't possibly scratch the surface, but I was unaware that, some of these families have been making wine for 150 years. That is incredible.
As you know, wine is very important for the Armenian history traditions. I mean, everybody knows about the Areni cave and the 6,000 years of history in the winemaking. I don't want to repeat that, but it's important. But it's something that defines the Armenians as well. I don't want everyone to just accept Armenians as people who face genocide and flee and reestablish themselves. We have so much more to offer to the world.
That's probably why I made the film I made, was to say, look, these people are not just about this. But so there were, at the highest point of winemakers in Artsakh, how many were there?
200 wine operations. I've been told, but I don't think anything is recorded anywhere. This is according to the the founder of Qatar. They were having wine festival in Artsakh, annual wine festival, and the last wine festival had 18 wine operations participating. At least we have this number. Unfortunately, we don't have any records, and I don't know. I mean, these articles can be something like facts.
That's true.
but there are not many. I read one article in Wine Enthusiast talking about wines in Artsakh, but he was mostly writing about the impact of these wineries on the wines in Armenia. So, and the impact of the barrels, the oak trees. The loss of the impact that it made on the Armenian winemaking, but not about the wineries. And that's why I decided to write about these people, because these people made investments. They were trying to establish a tradition there, but nobody's talking about them. It's like they've never been there. And Garen Baghdasaryan of Abris Wine, he partnered with a local person there in Artsakh, and his goal was to teach this family how to make wine again, how to make good quality wine, and to pass it to their next generations. So this wasn't just a business for these people. It wasn't, because all these people were in business, in different businesses their whole life. So this was something very dear to their heart because of their history, traditions, their ancestors.
We go from upwards of 200 wineries and the families and people who made those wines and indigenous grapes like Syriny that pretty much, as far as I understand, do not grow anywhere the same way. I mean, I know they're trying in Armenia. Off the record, everyone keeps telling me that Syriny in Armenia, it's not great. They're not happy with the results. They can't get it to grow properly. The yield is off. It's the wrong soil. The grape just doesn't have the life to it that it had in Artsakh. And so that's a very fascinating concept when you think about diaspora and people who are sort of tossed all over the world and grapes being tossed all over the world. Sometimes they work great, like Burgundy. Other times they want to go back home, like Syriny. It just wants to go home and grow there. So what's going to happen in the future here? This is an entire wine region that went from 200 to 0. Like you said, in some cases, the winemakers even destroyed their wineries on the way out. What's going to happen in the future? Do you see? Because if you look at the thousands of years that Armenian people and different people have been in this region, it probably has gone back and forth from being a wine region to not. Back and forth, back and forth. Do you think this is just one of those backs and then it'll go forth again? Or is this the end?
Well, I hope that this is not the end, but not right now. I mean, if there is any future, if there is anything that we will see as Artsakh being an Armenian, in Armenia again, and wine region with it, I don't think we will see that. Right now, with everything happening in the world and whatever is happening in Armenia, I don't think it's possible. But the most unfortunate and the sad thing that is happening with all these wineries, as we could see with the videos that the Azeri soldiers were distributing throughout the internet. So they have all these vineyards, ready vineyards and wine factories, and even wines stored. They can just use this, and I'm sure they are using it, using all these wines to promote their region as a winemaking region. But it's really sad to see that.
I mean, the conversation I'd love to have with you right now is incredibly geopolitical and would probably inflame a lot of people on either side, but it's a tough thing. But for now, I would say at least vines staying there is a good thing. At least that they're not all ripped up and gone forever is a good thing, I would think, at least.
Hopefully. I mean, we don't know what their plans are.
Fair. Yeah, that's fair.
But this story, I mean, as you said, wine is so much more. It's not home that you can build and then build somewhere else. It's something that takes people to their roots. And especially it's very true about Armenians. During the Soviet era, we used to make dessert wines, as I said, and we were in vodka production, brandy production. But people were still working with land, with soil, with grapes, right? It was never stopped. I think we will still continue making wine. And very important for the Armenians outside of Armenia and the world in general to give it a chance to try these wines.
Well, I mean, Ani, I want to just say thank you so much. I know that this is a tough conversation, but if you're a wine person and you're really into wine, know that these stories are going on peripherally to what you drink. And whether or not, you're drinking something from Paso and these stories are kind of mellow, Maybe somebody's arguing about water rights. If you're drinking a wine from, let's say a little further out, maybe a post-Soviet country, which there are many, Hungary. If you're drinking Hungarian wine, or you're drinking, lucky enough to drink Armenian wine or something like that, these stories are very intense and incredible. And the wine is one way to connect to them. So I want to thank you, Ani, for coming on here and talking about that. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for the opportunity.
I want to thank everybody for listening. It means a lot. If you love this podcast, of course, give it a great rating wherever you listen to pods. I want to thank my podcast producer, John Adams. And I want to say, if you are excited for Ghosts of Napa Valley, go to somfilms.com to either book a screening or find tickets as they pop up. October 11th is the day. It will be coming to Som TV. So if you're not a Som TV subscriber, what are you doing? All right, everybody, we'll talk soon, and make sure you drink something nice.